The Big Interview Valentine's Day edition. For Valentine's Day, we decided to present a different kind of interview. Recently, Queer News Tonight sat down with renowned author, editor, and columnist Rick Karlin. Rick has contributed to a variety of reputed LGBTQ+ papers in Chicago. In his new book, Last Call Chicago, 1001 LGBTQ+-Friendly Taverns, Hangouts, and Haunts, it was published last September, where he and the co-author, St Sukie de la Croix, have documented the history of Chicago's LGBTQ bars, from speakeasies to the present day, and address the issues facing bar owners and customers. The book has received extensive coverage from The Advocate and has been featured on Chicago news television stations. The interview was exceptionally special because it was performed by Queer News Tonight anchor Gregg Shapiro, who just happens to be Rick's husband. We hope you enjoy this special Valentine's Day interview.
Well, I have the extreme honor and privilege to welcome a very special guest and to interview him about his new book. I'm going to be talking to Rick Karlin, a 1997 inductee into the Chicago LGBT Hall of Fame. He's a writer, a playwright, a retired school teacher, and he has the honor of being married to me. Hello, Rick. How are you?
Hi. Well, it's so nice to be here with you.
I'm glad you could be here. So I'm really excited to talk to you about the book. It's truly a labor of love. It turned out really beautifully. I've been watching it progress. So I'm wondering if you can begin by telling the viewers about the genesis of the project that became the book Last Call Chicago, published by Rattling Good Yarns.
Well, it is a history of 1001 LGBT-friendly taverns, haunts, and hangouts. And the way it came about is I was sitting with some friends. We were just sitting around having cocktails, a bunch of friends from Chicago, and they were trying to remember the name of a bar that very short-lived that was on the Chicago River. And then you would go down to it and you could get on, they had boats that would take you up and down the Chicago River. It lasted only about a summer because no one wants to go on a boat in the winter in Chicago.
Right.
And nobody could remember the name. And I came up with not only the name of that bar, but the next three that went into that space.
In the same location.
In the same location, which happens quite often with Chicago gay bars. And I'll go into that later. But somebody said to me, well, you should write a book about those. You know everything about the bars. And that's how it came to be.
So how long did it take to create the book from inception to completion?
Well, I say 45 years because I was the entertainment editor and for Gay Chicago magazine, which was Chicago's gay bar entertainment guide. And I also worked for a number of other gay papers in Chicago. So, and at those papers, I would write the gossip column about what was going on in the bars. So I've been going to the gay bars since the mid-1970s until I left Chicago about 8 years ago. And so that was the period of which we're writing about. And then when we started to write the bars, I had this idea that I would like to do it almost like the old Dameron guides, where they would give you sort of a 4-sentence capture of what the bar was like and the address and the years it was open and things. And I approached the publisher of my memoir, Rattling Good Yarns Press, and Sukie de la Croix is one of their writers. And he was also a writer in Chicago for gay papers at the time. And I thought, well, he would be the perfect person to work on with this because we were doing basically the same job. Sometimes at sister papers like the Entertainment Guide and the newspaper, or at rival papers over 35 years.
Right.
And so I approached him about it, and we went to the publisher, and he said, well, I'm more interested in rather doing than that. Make it like a coffee table book where you discuss the bars and perhaps even expand on the history of them. So we ended up going from the very beginning of gay bars, like the 1920s, all the way to present day.
Which is how you got 1001. Is that
1001. Yeah, we actually had a few more that we dropped out because the publisher liked that number.
Right.
Yes.
So Last Call Chicago is a collaborative effort. As you mentioned, you co-wrote the book with St Sukie de la Croix. How did that collaboration work? I mean, did you, how did it work? Did you discuss things? Did you fight about things?
Oh, we discussed things. We fought about things a lot. We hung up on each other a lot. And it's very interesting because we have both since retired from Chicago. I live in South Florida, and Sukie lives in Palm Springs. And Sukie has this incredible archive of materials that I used when I was in Chicago working on my memoir as research. He's got the back issues of almost every gay paper that ever existed in Chicago. But what we did is I came up with a list of bars, and he came up with a list of bars from his archives, and we went through them, and we kind of eliminated ones that were like, well, that wasn't really a gay bar. They just had a gay bar for a gay night once for about 3 weeks, and then they stopped.
So there had to be a certain length of time that it existed.
Not only that, not so much that it existed, but that it was LGBT welcoming,
Sure.
And at the time, it was probably not LGBT welcoming. It was probably
Gay and lesbian, right.
Gay welcoming, a trans bar,
right.
leather bar. They were a little bit more specified. But what we did is we eliminated ones that were outside of the Cook County, which would be the Chicago area.
Right, right.
And then we also eliminated ones that were not primarily bars. There were a couple restaurants in there because they turned into more cocktail lounges or show lounges at night.
Right. So what do you hope for readers to get out of Last Call Chicago?
Well, I hope it brings back a lot of good memories for people. It also discusses how bars were community centers for our community. And that is the same whether you're in Chicago and discussing Chicago bars or Cincinnati or any larger city. They were the gathering spots for our community, and they are endangered at this point now.
Right.
There are much fewer gay bars. Chicago had more gay bars than any city in the world, more than New York, more than LA, because it has more bars. When I was growing up, there was a bar literally on every corner of every block in the city. If you lived on a city block, there was a bar on one of the 4 corners. And if you went to the next block over, there was a bar there. And I asked somebody, and they said, if you have 20 good patrons, you can make a go of it as a bar if you're just like a plain old bar. If you're going to be a show bar or a dance bar,
need a lot more.
You need a lot more regulars.
For
But
sure.
20 regulars will make a bar.
That's good to know. Let's not open a bar.
No, let's not.
So what do you think some of the things about the Chicago bars distinguish them from bars in other cities?
Well, one of the things that was very interesting is Chicago's bar liquor license history is a little different than other cities. The liquor license went to the address, not to the owner of the property. So, for example, if Joe owned a bar at 1217 Birch Street and he wanted to move his bar to 4th Avenue, he couldn't.
He'd have to apply for a new...
He'd have to apply for a new license over
for that
there.
address.
But 1217 Birch Avenue would keep its license. So what people did is, if they didn't make a go of a bar, they would rent out the use of their address and liquor license to somebody else who would open a bar doing business as, and then whatever new name they put on it.
Wow, okay.
So in the back of our book, we have a place called Shared Spaces. So in Chicago, there would be an address, and there'd be like 15 gay bars at the same address.
Wow, amazing. There's been a lot of discussion lately, including a New York Times article, about the disappearance of lesbian bars. What do you think Last Call Chicago tells readers about the city's history of women's bars?
Well, Chicago, again, being a big bar city, had a great lesbian bar scene. As recently as the 1980s, there were like 12 or 14 very popular, very big lesbian bars in Chicago. At this point now, there are still 2 really strong ones.
2 out of 12.
2 out of 12. There's a couple more that are smaller bars that are still going, but there are 2 that are like, and one of them recently opened and was in the New York Times.
Right.
Because a lesbian bar opening nowadays is very rare.
Right, that was Nobody's Darling.
Right. Nobody's Darling is one of the newest gay bars in Chicago. It's a lesbian bar, and it's owned by 2 black women. So it's women of color owning a bar, which is even rarer.
Right. Do you think that the men's bars have become more welcoming to women also because of the lack of women's bars?
Well, I think that's it. I also think that, part of the reason gay and lesbian bars are having problems is what those of us who have been around for a while and have fought for is the assimilation of gay people into mainstream culture. Right. And so gay and lesbian people nowadays feel comfortable going just about anywhere, at least in big cities. I don't know if that's the same in Two Mules, Iowa, or, somewhere in Utah, may be different.
Right.
But in big cities, they pretty much feel comfortable going just about anywhere. And although the new political environment also changed.
Right, that'll certainly have an effect. So Last Call Chicago certainly has the potential to be an invaluable research tool. What would it mean to you if it was used in that capacity?
Well, I think it's great. The one thing we do say to researchers is much of our book is based on oral histories. So, we can check when a bar was open, we can check the addresses, we can check that information. Again, some of our bars, we just have an intersection or a neighborhood where a bar was, and somebody said, well, it was open in the late 50s. And 4 or 5 people confirmed that that bar was there.
Wow.
But we don't have all the information. But our hope is that not only will this be of use to researchers of Chicago history and gay bar history in general, but also that it inspires people from other cities.
To do
I'd
their
love
own?
to see Columbus do one of these, Washington, D.C., and it has to be people that know the bars in that area.
Of course, right.
And it has to be done soon because the people that know the bars in those areas
they're aging,
that are gone are aging, and someone needs to get their story
for sure
about the bars. Because the most entertaining part about this book are the recollections of the people about the bars in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s.
Wow.
So that's one of the best parts about it.
The book is also full of really fun graphics. There's images and there's advertisements for the various and sundry bars. Are there 1 or 2 that stand out to you as favorites?
Well, yes. Well, and I'm going to hold up the book. I know they showed it earlier, but the entire cover is, trying to get that so it's the right way there.
It looks good, yeah.
The entire cover is a collage of ads from old bars that have long gone at this time. One of my favorites is for the K9 Club, which, very interesting, during Prohibition, there were no gay bars. But the day after Prohibition, there were suddenly bars everywhere. They just popped up overnight.
I don't know how that happened.
They got them ready so fast. So these speakeasies just became bars. Some of them became gay bars. And the K9 Club was one of a group of bars at that time. It was the pansy craze. And it was the very effeminate men. You can see them in old movies, like old Cary Grant movies. the butlers and things are
Like Pangborn, the actor.
Franklin Pang.
Right, right.
One of the actors who always played those roles. And the K9 Club's logo was a cartoon of this very swishy pansy, like sort of posed like this. And it's like, oh, please, why should I be managed? And I just love that.
It is great. It's a great image. Is there another one?
Pardon me?
Another one that you like?
Well, another one I love is it's on the cover. It's kind of hard to see here. It's for Jamie's, and I loved it because it's just such a typical shot of. There it is.
There you go.
Of
very 70s.
The drawings of men of that era, very Tom of Finland-esque kind of thing.
Right, tight jeans, big muscles.
Yeah, big basket. Right. You know, the basket's as big as his whole head.
Right. Is there a bar that closed, that you wrote about, that closed before you had a chance to visit it, that you wish you could have been?
Well, there were two, Alfie's and Le Pub, which were the same era. I came out in 1976. The bicentennial year was my year of independence as well. And Alfie's and Le Pub closed soon after I came out. I could have gone to them, but for some reason I didn't. They're both the kind of bars I would have liked.
Well, I've been to Alfie's and it was quite wonderful.
Yes. And Le Pub had performers, cabaret performers, and one of them was Karen Mason, who went on to become a big Broadway star. Mm-hmm. She was in Sunset Boulevard, Mamma Mia, and Drew Robbins Broadway. And we've become very good friends, but I would have loved to have seen her in a gay bar. I saw her in straight bars when I thought I was straight.
And then, so you and St Sukie Delacroix collaborated on this book. It just recently came out. It's doing very well. You're getting lots of good press coverage, lots of good reviews. Is there the possibility of a book on which you might collaborate again in the future?
Well, actually, I did come up with one, and I want Sukie and I have talked about it a little bit. I'd like to do a similar book, but based on LGBT support groups at the time.
Like social service
agency groups, but also just affinity groups like gay men's choruses. And, there was even a Gay Overeaters Anonymous and a gay parents group for gay people with children, which I belonged to in the early 70s, and how those served our community. And there was quite a few of those. And I'm sure we could come up with 1,001 of those.
Easily.
So that may be our next book.
Fantastic. Rick, my love, thank you so very much for doing this. I really
thank you. And I must say, you are the most handsome interviewer I've ever had. Thank you.
Pshaw.